something that people want to go into, long hours, hard work, and often people say very unsafe. And indeed, construction can be quite unsafe unless there are proper measures put in place. But robotics will revolutionise that. And it's not that we're going to lose our jobs. It's that people will actually be doing different types of jobs in construction. So from the younger generation, I think that's a really exciting shift in the mindset. But also, I would have to say, I'm thinking that we should be looking at the ageing population as well. People are living longer. And I'm thinking that ageing should actually be thought of as an opportunity. People shouldn't be out of the workforce at the age of 55, 60, whatever it might be. And particularly, I'm thinking in construction, you've got a huge amount of experience, knowledge. People know how to build things. People know how to put things together. We shouldn't lose that. What we should be doing is retraining the older generation to use computer technology, to use robotics, to use systems to actually undertake construction and be part of the workforce for as long as they want to be part of the workforce. So I can foresee a time, I think, where instead of people sitting in McDonald's drinking their cups of tea, they'll be sitting in McDonald's and they'll be on their tablets and they'll be organising the construction of a new airport in Noida or somewhere like that.
Thank you, Doctor. Actually, these are all very, very interesting points, and I'd like to just use this as a segue to start talking about things that we are doing, because I also, in addition to being an investor, I also am actually on boards of several leading institutions, including IIT Bhubaneswar, IIIT Hyderabad, and all of these programs have started to integrate things into what I call the next generation building sciences. What does that mean? It means smart building. How do you ensure that like the material that's going in is lighter, stronger, is basically greener? You can design things faster. And between IIT Madras and IIT Hyderabad, there's a lot of cool stuff going on, including bringing in aspects of AI, machine learning, data pattern recognitions in the context of just building a city or operating a city, because the whole notion of building, right, has actually changed. Because if you look at the life cycle of that asset, a building will last for 20, 25 years. Where someone makes real money out of a building is operations. And if you have ways to actually pick up data very, very smartly, sift through data, make enhancements, it could be the HVAC, it could be the electrical, it could be the plumbing, it could be basically whatever, layout, which can actually change quite rapidly. You've actually created something which is a very, very reusable asset as compared to the previous generation buildings, which were put in one fixed kind of configuration and you couldn't do anything more with it. So these are all some really cool things. And then if you look at like the computer science curriculum, a lot of pure sciences, a lot of fine arts, especially when you talk in the context of AR and VR, which is creativity, it's coming into the base computer science curriculum in all the IITs and IIITs and NITs, which actually is a good thing because people are getting reskilled for what's going to happen tomorrow. So now I'll just get Ronan to actually talk a little bit about his company. His company is very interesting. If you're doing a whole bunch of touch screen testing in the industry context or touch screen testing for the automotive industry, it all used to be a manual process. So these kids out of Kerala, congratulations, came up with this just a hand, which basically now tests these interfaces a lot faster. It's for companies like Bosch, it's for automobile companies, which you already got some contracts. Yeah. So please, Ronan.
Okay. Actually, initially, our focus is to build a perfect robotic companion. Like everyone in our home or office, we need some point, we need to think if we have a companion or helping hand with us, we can complete our task much easily or we can save a lot of times. So our initial phase of this company, we started addressing a particular problem in the industry. 2014, we met a Robot Bosch engineering team from car infotainment system. So they have a particular issue for automating the touchscreen testing and the car infotainment stereo system. So touchscreens are all over this world. Most of us are familiar, and then error message showing in our Android device. The device is not responding. This is due to the lack of proper testing. So all they want us to build a replication of human hand touching capability. So we thought it's good chance to explore more into the robotic automation, especially through the robotic manipulator industry. So we built a robotic arm which can produce human type touches. So by using those robotic arm, the robot Bosch, what they did is they reduced the testing time period from 3 days to 1 day. So here the value addition is happening. We all are doing business to generate revenue, more revenue. Actually, we are trying to cut short the time. So here, how we are making more revenue, it's directly proportional to how we are saving how much amount of money, time. So here, we started with the touchscreen testing, like mimicking a single capabilities of human hand. Then right now we are reaching as a point where we can generate almost every capabilities of a human hand. For example, I will give you a thought process. If you look around us, you can see a lot of beautiful things. Look at lights, mic, and tables, chairs, everything we created, the humans created using our bare hands. How we created this? Using a simple hands, the time we created those things, this complex stuff, our brain helped us, our eyes helped us. Most of the time, people were sitting in a position and completing their task or jobs. So, initially, what we thought is replicating this hand capability with an AI and vision can replicate the entire process. So, in a simple word, we are replicating the human capability with the artificial intelligence and vision feedback system. So, I told you we started with the touchscreen testing. So the product is already selling. We recently delivered the 7th purchase order for the Bosch, and HCL, Honeywell, and Harman and audience are all using the product. And using the Honeywell, recently we implemented this particular robotic arm to test the aviation panels. So we all know, even in a car stereo system or a mobile phone, having an error message won't create much problems. But a small error message in an aviation panel can cause more. So the after effect is really, really big. So the need of testing in that particular area is really relevant. So we are not only trying to focus on the testing industry. This is what we are. This is what the place we choose to prove the model. Like we can replicate the human hand capability with the vision feedback and AI, and we can solve such and such problems. We can save a particular amount of money and time. Then the next aim is to build a robotic arm which exactly looks like human hand, which can control by human brain signals. So by building and moving forward to building a perfect human companion for humans, robotic companion for humans, all we need to build a channel, a proper communication channel between the machine and the human. Because right now the technology is really fast moving, and adoption of each and every technology for a particular business is directly proportional to how we are targeting to save time and generating more revenue. So here, the AI, we all are familiar about the Watson and the Siri and all. So AI is deep learning is reaches a certain level. Right now, there are bunches of hardware startup companies, including Shastra Robotics, are trying to build or replicate human hand capabilities. So trying to mimic the humanoid robots. So once it is completed, we definitely have a mission which capable more than a human hand or human capabilities with an AI and vision. So the next step is to understand what exactly happening inside that mission. That is what we are right now more focused.
Thank you, Ron. So I think one thing is clear: the nature of the jobs are changing. It will change. There are three good examples here. One is intelligent construction, where you will actually start to get more and more people from different disciplines actually helping out in a unified manner. Ronan's kind of value proposition actually takes away manual testers. But what do manual testers do? It's no different than when we wrote the first like automated testing tools for the web. I'm talking about, or even like software, a lot of the manual testers went away. But they actually started taking on different roles where they could actually start to look at other aspects of testing, like user experience, usability, etc. So I'm pretty sure some of these jobs will be reskilled or what I call side-skilled or in some cases upskilled. If you look at like basically electric vehicles, the entire notion of how automobiles are manufactured in India, and if it becomes EV, a lot of the jobs will go away. It'll have to be kind of reskilled. They'll have to be retaught. And the nice thing is some of this thing is already happening in institutions at the college level, which will basically have a positive impact. But clearly all the workforce that actually gets displaced, we'll have to figure out, okay, are there skills that we can actually leverage back in the core context, maybe even in robotics in terms of testing, but like what all can you test? Can they actually start to contribute more towards the design of robots, etc.? So these are things which I think we'll have to start looking at as a society. But there will be some jobs that will go away. I don't think you'll find, and that's basically a fact that we have to accept. So maybe what I'll do is like start with Tarun again. Talk about some of the jobs that are very different in your automobile context, and then what will you do with, say, traditional resources?
One thing that always surprises me about the automotive industry in general is that how, I'm not sure if complacent is the word, but how unprepared we are right now as an industry, right? If you look at an electric vehicle and you compare that with a petrol vehicle, it's not that, oh, okay, like just change a few components. Practically 80% of the stuff that went in an automotive today is redundant, right? Your engine is no longer there. And that means your folks producing the crankshafts, producing pistons, piston rings, the entire engine casings, they're all out of a job. Your entire fuel tank, fuel lines, what do you call them? Fuel filters, carburetors, your entire transmission, because most electric vehicles don't need a transmission, right? So folks producing gearboxes, gear chains, all of that, they're all out of a job. They're all out of a business, right? Even the vehicle itself, now you're basically getting the chassis. Like the way a complete vehicle is made is completely different. For example, in our case, if you look at a regular scooter, and we are producing a scooter today, it's basically one steel pipe that starts from here at the throttle, at the handlebar, goes here, splits into two, and that's your entire frame. In our case, 80% of that is aluminium. Most of it is not a pipe. It is cast aluminium. It is stamped aluminium. So it's a very different frame altogether. So even the companies which are producing the frames the way they have been producing for the last 50 years, actually out of business. And it is just surprising how, like, not everybody is completely flipping out that those businesses and those jobs are not going to exist, right? It always seems like, hey, it's just a small number, but for that number to go from 10,000 to 10 million, honestly, it won't take more than a decade. So what happens? Like is suddenly the entire automotive industry out of a job? No. You now need very different sort of jobs, right? The role of electronic manufacturing services, that business becomes really, really huge because like 50% of your BOM is really in electronics in an electric vehicle. The role of folks making motors, right, suddenly shoots up like crazy because that's the new motor, that's the new engine. And a complete new industry producing lithium-ion cells and lithium-ion battery pack comes into existence. And that's going to be 30% of your vehicle cost, even if costs keep dropping down, right? And it's just surprising how still there is nobody, forget about lithium-ion cells, nobody even talks about that at all, but there's still how almost nobody even building lithium-ion battery packs. So, well, if I think about it positively, while those jobs go away, they're going to be replaced by something actually even more high value, if you think about it. Assembling a PCB is more high value than assembling a piston ring, right? But you're going to see basically a massive shakedown in the automotive industry in the next 10 to 15 years. Because unlike many other industries, automotive is probably one of those last few industries where India is actually good, right? Like India is not a services back house. India actually manufactures automobile at a pretty good quantum, right? So when everything changes electric, this is going to be a very dramatic change in the entire supply chain.
Well, hopefully in the future we'll have Ronan's company working with your company assembling like your scooters, or we'll have like Ronan's company helping Dr. Ann's company building smart buildings. So these are things, but the biggest concern is the existing workforce. What do we do with that? and the expertise. Ronan, you've actually replaced a bunch of manual testers.
Yeah.
What will they do?
Actually, we are not replacing the manual testers. So certain jobs we can do in manual testers, but certain jobs we can't achieve by our bare hands. Like in touchscreen testing itself, some testing we can do it ourselves because it will long 2-3 hours, but in a certain parameters we have to check it. We can do it ourselves. But some other test like 1,000 click per minute, it will long 2-3 days continuously. After a certain millions of click, it will produce an error. For addressing that problem, we have to replicate that error again. So last time, the Bosch solved a particular error message in their car infotainment system because after a certain milestones, their infotainment system is getting blank. So it's a critical error. So solving that particular error, we have to replicate that error in that factory itself. So by using a human hand, we can't do that. There we can use a robotic arm. And right now, in Bosch and HCL and all MNCs, they're OEMs and they're using our robot alongside with their testing team. Like if we get that output, then we need to take care of that output and we need to process some parameters and according to, we have to act like that. So we are not here terminating the particular teamwork, but that we can use that human resources for more functionalities, like we can use our brain and we can avoid the replicated boring task. That's what we are trying to implement using the automation technology. Similarly, in decades back in the construction industry, the people are processing a land for the construction. Right now we are using more machines, which is not mean that they're losing their job, but within few days after processing the land, they're making a lot of other opportunities, like how we are cut shorting the time for testing and releasing new product, which means we are getting more feedback from that. Then we have to iterate that product. That particular product itself creating another opportunity or addressing a lot of problems, and we need another set of human resources for completing this task, which directly proportional to the how much revenue that organization is going to produce. That's how the technology adoption is happening in this industry.
Thank you, Ronan. Would you care to add your point of view, at least in...
I think you've made it very clear in terms of construction. There are some fundamentals. Concrete was used in the construction of the pyramids, and it's still used today. So I think concrete will remain with us. But we won't have steel fixers. We'll have graphene connectors and so forth. I think jobs will change. But also, I do think that we shouldn't be fearful at all, because the jobs will change, and they have always changed slightly. I think there's a much more exciting format of construction, though, if you're talking about the construction industry, and that is about design for manufacture and assembly on site, which is actually a way to build components and build components more reliably using less material, less time and less resources, so more sustainably. And then when you take these component parts that have been designed through a BIM model and so on and so forth, you then take them to site and you assemble them like Lego. So there will be a very different way of assembling buildings. I looked at a project very recently, and the time frame on it was a very long time frame for the construction of this major industrial facility. And there was also a huge problem associated with labour. And I said, so if we did this under a DFMA scheme, we could actually reduce the amount of construction workers by 80% and reduce the time to about 15% of the construction time. Now, what client is not going to like that? They can save money, they can save resources, etc. But I also think if you're looking at some fundamentals, the types of people that we're going to get into the business are going to be different. I don't think we're going to get as many building services engineers or fire engineers. We will have to have some, of course, but we will be looking much more for data analysts, people who have degrees in manipulation of data, and physicists and so forth, looking for innovations. I think they will be working together with the engineers and the developers of the future, rather than just taking in 100 civil engineering graduates or whatever. So I think education has to change, and I think in our pre-conversation you were talking about some very useful developments in curriculum and so forth. This also has to be reflected. So it's a whole cycle, and I think that one of the things that we cannot take away from, so I'm all in favour of robotics and robots using robots for many of our activities and so forth. But when we think about medical diagnosis and so forth, so I see that some insurance companies are looking at having apps on your phone to diagnose whether or not you need health insurance, etc. There are some others that are looking for diagnosis for certain diseases, etc. One thing robots cannot do is have an emotion. And I don't think we can ever conceive of a day when a robot can have an emotion. So that's the only thing that we retain as our own human right, I think. But I think we shouldn't be fearful. I think there are so many exciting opportunities. It's a changing world, and we should be embracing these changes, because if people are actually looking, there are many opportunities for people to have very fulfilling and enjoyable lives.
Thank you. So actually, I thought let's just make it a little bit more interactive, take some questions, because I'm sure you folks have a lot of at least angst in some instances, and maybe some interest. I mean, data sciences, right? How is it going to transform every discipline? Next generation material science. Like when I was doing my BTech in IIT 30 years ago, no one wanted to take metallurgy or material science. Now it's probably one of the hottest areas. No one wanted to do physics, chemistry, as it applies to data analytics, right? So people are designing some really cool algorithms and things like that. So things will change. So with that in mind, I'll just throw it open and we'll have our panelists answer.
Hello. Hi, my question goes to Tarun, right? So Tarun, wonderful stuff you're doing, right? Really, really impressive. And my question is to you. I mean, you are developing every facility for the Hello, am I audible? Yeah. So every facility in-house, every machinery. So there's a big paradox that we face in manufacturing, that develop a part or develop the machinery, right? So how you are tackling this? I mean, are you developing the machine for the new parts in-house, or I mean, how you are doing it? You are importing the parts, you are importing the machinery?
So let me just clarify this. The designs are all new, and often the technologies are all new. But yes, we are not manufacturing them ourselves, right? So when I say we don't use, for example, a steel tube in a frame and we use a cast aluminium member, you've got hundreds of vendors in India who can do really, really good quality castings, aluminium castings, right? When I say we have probably electronics of the extent of a high-end luxury car and a scooter, those assemblers, people who can assemble that, people who can make those PCBs already exist in the country, right? You've got fairly large EMS houses already in here. The business cases for all of them are suddenly, however, new. Right? Suddenly you're talking to somebody who was manufacturing a tablet for a large consumer company, and you're discussing, making, for example, a high-density charger for a scooter, right? So the business case becomes very different, but not necessarily, it's not a technology shift, which means we don't have to take another leap and actually bring in manufacturing in-house. From a manufacturing perspective, we only do the assembly in-house, except the battery, where we did run into that problem. So when we were building the battery pack, we started with this exact same mindset and we applied it here, that we will design the battery pack. Ultimately, the processes are going to be standard, borrowed from other industries. We're going to go to those guys and get them to make the battery pack for us. This is one place where we hit a wall, because we realized that lithium-ion battery packs, every process that you're talking about is actually a very new process. Right from the way you weld those cells, to the way you will actually assemble the entire thing, to the thermal compounds that you will use, to how you will apply them, it's all actually radically different. it's not new science, it's not stuff that needs new invention, but the manufacturing processes are actually not well understood. So battery was the one place where we had to go actually fairly deep into setting up our own processes, and in a few cases actually not in few cases actually, all the stations, setting up our own, well, as you call them, setting up our own machines, right? So you design the process and you get equipment for those processes manufactured. Right? So you actually have to go really up the value chain, right? Not just manufacture the battery pack, but actually first manufacture the equipment that will make the battery pack. But this was only one thing. If this happened across the vehicle, I think we would take 10 years to get to production. So luckily, we don't have to do that. Yes.
Follow-up question, yeah, I have that. I mean, yeah, okay, sure.
My name is Nikhil, and I'm a student member of RICS and a student of Construction Project Management. My question is to Dr. Ann. Ma'am, the level of infrastructure and resources in the countries in West and in Asian countries are different. So how can and what are the challenges that we face from going in majorly in cast in situ to going towards precast that can cause a lot of averting in delays and that cause a lot of cost overruns? We can reduce these cost overruns. So what are the challenges that we face?
A very good question. And I think your preface was absolutely correct, that we do have challenges and we do have opportunities in different places. And I think that the construction market in different countries also is one of the challenges. So one of the particular challenges I would say that we have found in terms of precasting in some countries is that the supply chains are very well established. And you are disrupting the supply chains when you're going into a precasting situation. Same with steel fixing. You know, if you're going to be assembling the steel on site that has already been tailored to be very fast for construction, you will upset a lot of the downstream players in the supply chain. So I think the supply chain issue is a really, really important one to deal with. And unions, of course, are very, very strong in this. So unions and supply chain are dominant. I think the technologies are not particularly challenging, because the technologies, we've got lots of good examples of things to avoid and pitfalls to avoid. I think quality control is really important, and making sure that the quality is actually controlled. But when you've got people who are going to be doing testing and who are going to be doing automatic testing and so forth, that will actually develop as you develop the industry. So I think the challenges are not particularly different in different places. It's the pace of the challenge is different. Does that answer your question?
Actually, when you talk about modular construction, the very first example happened out of IIT Madras, where they actually put out these two-story homes. The next thing was L&T took it out to do modular construction for parking lots, because it becomes easy. You can lay things. Guess what? The government of India came and said, if you do modular construction and then you come in and assemble it at a site, the taxes will be at least like 3x more. So now even the government has to start thinking. And that is our biggest challenge, because they keep on supporting these unions, and it's like a basic, very antiquated supply chain. Less to do with technology. I mean, I think we have the ability to do that. If you look at even some of the new kind of flyover constructions, they are being done in a modular fashion. But there are issues. And the government needs to actually step up. And hopefully you folks should influence that, because you're still studying. And I'm sure in your colleges too, there'll be new kind of courses being introduced towards these techniques, new materials, all that kind of good stuff. I think he was...
Hi, Mike. There's a follow-up question to Tarun itself. Right. So you said that in battery you got stuck up somewhere. So is there something new you're doing in the battery, or it is the same battery that you are using? I mean, there are several battery manufacturers in India also.
Oh no, going from lead acid to something like lithium ion, and by the way, lithium ion may not be the end of the road. The new technologies will keep coming up. But going from lead acid to almost any of these technologies is almost changing the industry for these guys. You can't say that, hey, I know how to make lead acid batteries, so I'll start making lithium ion batteries, right? There's zero correlation, I would say, right? Yes, because you are in that industry, and if you have disposable cash sitting on your balance sheets, so you should probably invest in lithium ion and learn and bring in that competency, but it's not already there, right? Just something to contrast. A lead acid battery pack has 70% lead in it, right? A lithium ion battery pack has less than 5% lithium in it, right? A lead acid battery pack is basically one cell, typically. A lithium ion battery pack, for like something for what we do, is a combination of several hundred cells. So one of the most important processes that goes inside manufacturing a lithium ion battery pack is actually, spot welding or wire bonding. You're talking about at least 1,000 to 2,000 welds per battery pack. And that is the crux of the entire assembly, right? Like doing quality control there and doing those welds. So you can't just, unfortunately, you can't just migrate from one technology to another, because this is a massive change, right? It's not a minor improvement over the same technology.
Any more questions? Okay, last one.
Yeah, I belong to CSR family. My name is Vasan. My question is for Mr. Tarun actually. And thanks a lot actually for bringing this new kind of vehicles in the market. But one thing comes to my mind is that, let us say, something happens on the road or during the cycle of the vehicle actually. So what about this after sales and service support from your side? Are giving a thought on that?
Right.
So the whole notion of connected devices, connected vehicles was actually thought of when these kids started their journey. So they started thinking about it right then. It was not the vehicle. Now what happens is there are at least like 70 data points that you're tracking, right, in the EV as it's running. Or maybe 40 on the motor. And all of this goes to the cloud. There's analytics that's happening. They already know where the next service center is. So essentially your entire kind of value proposition or experience of owning a vehicle becomes very, very different from what it was in the previous. If you bought a scooter, then you have to go back to the same dealer. Here it's a network of various substations that are there for charging, or it could be for repairs, or it could be swaps, because you really don't need to repair a battery. You'll just swap the battery out. And all of it is done using basically the Android panel for display to the... I'll give you another example. I mean, I don't know whether these guys still have it, but like it's there in a lot of EVs. Based on your profile and the amount of charge left, it'll actually kind of change the settings so that the speed gets lowered. You can actually get the distance to the next charging station. It does that automatically. It's able to figure that out. I'm sure they have some configuration like this.
Yeah, that's one of the patents we have. So servicing today in automobiles, we think is extremely inefficient, right? Actually, it starts from an automaker bragging about how many touch points they have in a city, right? That somebody has 5,000 touch points in a place like India. So basically a touch point in every tehsil. I think fundamentally that concept is flawed. You need to have a vehicle that does not need to come back to you for servicing, right? So for example, this is probably my best example. If you're riding a typical scooter, and let's say you start hearing some sort of a knocking sound coming from the rear of the vehicle, what will you do? Your typical response would be, okay, let me figure out the next weekend that I'll free. I'm going to take that to a mechanic. The guy will probably take 3 hours, open up everything, right? And then finally conclude, he will do a lot of RC and conclude, the problem is with the bearing in your wheel or in your transmission, right? And it takes time, and it takes a lot of effort on your part, right? It's supremely inefficient, right? So electric vehicles lend themselves very well to being smart vehicles because fundamentally your drivetrain has a lot of sensors built in, right? So I just said, like the motor itself throws out like 40 parameters, right? There's the motor, there's a battery, there's the BMS, there's a charger, there's a dashboard, there's a whole bunch of sensors on the vehicle. So there's a lot of data coming back to you. So in our case, for example, when you hear that there is a sound coming back from the vehicle, even before you know it, there are enough sensors, and this is an actual example, this is an actual patent that we have on the vehicle. We are able to pinpoint that knocking sound that you're hearing, is it because we're looking at the motor currents, which are a predictor of the torque, which are a predictor of, exactly which component is producing that. We're able to actually pinpoint, is the problem in your motor, is the problem in your transmission, is the problem in your wheel, right? And actually, based on the frequency, we are able to tell you, is it 500 kilometers from failure, is it 50,000 kilometers from failure? And basis that, from the dashboard, which is basically a touch screen, you can actually raise a service request. So somebody can come up to your home, so you don't need to have 5,000 touch points. Somebody turns at your house, knowing exactly what needs to be replaced, what is the exact problem, and then your problem gets resolved. Right? So service in the future with vehicles is going to look and feel very different. Right? It's going to be less of root cause analysis by a mechanic. It is going to be more of maybe just a hot swap or directly solving that problem. Right? The analysis would be mostly done with data later in the cloud, earlier in the cloud. Right? Does that answer your question to some extent? Yeah.
We'll have to, thank you. We'll have to call it a wrap. Thank you so much for the panel. Dr. Sundarajan, may I please request you to present mementos to our panelists. Can we have the memento for Mr. Tarun Mehta? Many thanks for your insights. For Mr. Aaron P. of Shastra Robotics. And Dr. Annie Kerr of Citi's Mott McDonald Group. Wonderful panel on how robotics can be weaved into our daily lives. I would also like to thank Dr. Sundarajan.
So thank you, everyone. And in case you need to ask any questions on robotics, AI, machine learning, data sciences, what's happening, they have my email address. You can actually kind of send me an email. Thanks.
Indeed, a very interesting session on disruption. But the question is, what comes after disruption? It's not just enough to have an idea or an innovation. There's money needed to make that a stable business model. So our next